Welcome everybody to another episode of the Key to Games podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. I am Josh Beiser, and joining me, my co-host, indie developer from Casual Game Studio, Joshua Reyes. How are you doing this week?
I'm doing great. I had an interesting week, Josh. It was my birthday week, and we also had a massive chemical spill, train wreck. So tied in the same. So we had to deal with that. And other than that, it's been a productive and fun week. How about yourself, Josh?
I'm dealing with my own old man problem, trying to get my monitor at the right height so it doesn't break my neck, which has been fun. And Josh and I, we've been trying to find the next perfect office chair. So
Yes.
Again, it's an old Josh birthday month, I think, this time.
That's right. That's right.
But other than that, working on the book, working on presentations, all that great stuff. We recorded another episode of our Indie Inquiry show. Josh came on as the co-host, and we're going to be doing more of those in the future. So if you are an indie developer with a store page you'd like us to review, please reach out, as we're going to be trying to get them done more regularly. And hopefully, when Seth is feeling better, we also need to schedule time for a podcast or a roundtable on our influential game series. So it's a very busy little month for us this time around.
Definitely. Always good, though. Always good.
So, for our topic this week, we're going to be discussing kind of a fallout that happened at the start of this year when it came to live service games. And as of the middle of February, quite a few of the somewhat notable names have gone out. Let's see, we have Marvel's Avengers, Knockout City, Rumbleverse, Apex Legends Mobile, not the actual PC version, and there were a few other ones, Cross City, Cross something. And it's been a very, for people who don't, I think, follow mobile and live service games, a lot of them are going doom and gloom, oh my god, how could this happen and all that. But for someone like me, especially after I wrote my book about free-to-play games, and even just watching how people cover live service games today, it didn't really seem all that surprising. So, from you, what do you make of kind of this whole, all these major names a year, 2 years ago, cut, flatline?
Yeah, I mean, just like you, I eventually saw this coming, and we're going to get into the various points and the reasons why live service games are good and their cons, right? And the cons are definitely the issue here. And I would say really the reason that a lot of these are facing is the main issues. There's many of them, but the main one is kind of, I would say, end game capitalism for these studios, right? Is that they are forced into a position where they have to make profit year over year, and they have to increase it. And then not only that, you have the studio's responsibilities of creating constant content updates, constantly working on the game, having developers constantly working. Oh, I can see that in my thing. That's cool. And so it's there's so much pressure on these types of games as a service, right? To be pushed forward, and the amount of money that it takes, and the amount of ROI that's needed for them to be considered successful. And then we could go into the other tenets about the consumer side. We'll get into that later. But I think the main point of it is just the non-sustainable business model that they use to fund the games. And I think that's basically my basic take on it, Josh. How are you feeling about it?
Yep. And I agree with you on that. I have a critical thought penned to go up this coming week, with the whole Next Fest kind of pushing me back, covering 14 games an episode has been kind of slowing me down there.
What was the total that you got?
Oh, jeez, at this rate, will probably be at least 60 to 80 games actually cover in video form. So
awesome.
A lot of games there. But that's actually a really good segue into this point. There are a lot of live service games.
Yes.
And as you said, as I'll talk about in my critical thought, there's big money in this. Again, when we look at the small side of a live service game, they can be pulling in $5 to $10 million a month.
Yeah.
On the
Yeah.
large end, that's easily 50 million plus. And that is when we talk about like the Genshin Impacts. What was another big one? A Blue Archive has recently been blowing up. That's one I think published by Nexon. So developers and publishers are not stupid. They see huge money. They are going to run towards that, as we saw with the MMO rush of the 2000s. And as you said, one of the biggest issues these games have is, what's the end game? What does it look like to play this game 6 months, a year, 3 years down the line? And I think this is where a lot of kind of like major studios tend to fail when it comes to their live service. When you look at companies like, did Naughty Dog do Marvel's Avengers? I always keep forgetting who. No, it wasn't Naughty Dog, it was Crystal Dynamics.
Crystal Dynamics, yes.
When you look at kind of like major companies like Crystal Dynamics, BioWare, I don't know who did Knockout City, but like these come from very established studios. Like they're not, they're not like newbies when it comes to these kinds of games. But the one area where they really aren't familiar with is continued support and development.
Yes.
And this is, I think, the biggest aspect that really differentiates, like, when we talk about live service from the MMO market. When you look at the MMOs, you get maybe an expansion once a year, maybe like 1 or 2 every 4 to 6 months. Okay, we play the game, we wait for the expansion, we come back, everyone gets money.
Right.
In the live service area, when we talk about games like, from literally like I'm not sure there is a live service or a mobile game that's Z, so it's A to Z now in terms of mobile games. They have to put out content almost every 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And not just, and when we say content, we don't mean, a new shirt or here's a new cosmetic. We mean a new gacha character. We mean changing something, a new weekly event, a new story event. It is continual development. And it's not just, again, these light things. The one that I'm playing with Arknights, they just did their 3.5-year anniversary event where they, did like a whole new chapter, whole new stuff. They'll probably have something big, like they have their own, there's different versions for global and for China. So all the global players are looking at what's coming out in China as kind of like the next, 6 to 8 months of content. If you look at something like Genshin has received like almost like sequel levels amount of content over its last few years. They've recently announced there's going to be now the MiHoYo verse, where it's just going to be this massive game. They're retiring, I think, Honkai Impact, but they've already have a sequel game already in the works, and they're probably, when Genshin Impact stops, they already got a game plan for that one. They are planning not like days or weeks ahead. They are planning years ahead. And this, I think, is what really stops a lot of major studios. I mean, if you look at something like Anthem, like what was Anthem's, 1 year anniversary plan? What was Knockout City or Rumbleverse? And we did play Rumbleverse, like for that first like day it came out, and it was a cute game. But again, it's that one big question. Where do you go with it? What does this look like, 8 to 10 months down the line? I think this is something I'm curious about for you, since we talk about you are definitely more versed in competitive fighting games than I am. When we look at how fighting games are supported, month by month, year by year, it's typically either like, from where I'm sitting, like a new character or bounce patches. You don't see, like I was about to ask, you don't see like massive like foundational changes in a fighting game, right?
Yeah, you'll be basically in a fight. No major changes. Like the only thing, a new character, some balance stuff, maybe a level if you're lucky, but probably not. And that's about it. Maybe, and then some costume upgrades or something that you can wear when you're not in tournament play, etc. But that's it, right? And as you were, going back to the point, it's the amount of content grind. I think that a lot of these studios that are coming, they see the money, right, in the live service things, and they're like, oh, we got to get into this, and so they start developing the game, maybe with maybe an older mentality. And again, when you're making that game, we've discussed this before, you need to come out of the gate and have your years in advance of what you're going to do, because it is a live service game. So in that respect, you have to be planning for it to be in service for as long as possible. And so not having a plan coming straight out of the gate, what you're going to do is a lot of the things that they run into a big problem, because as soon as the content doesn't update, and you were saying like 2 to 3 weeks, I think some players want updates like daily almost, I feel like. And if it's like goes 2 days without an update, they think the game is dead and they'll leave. And so, like, that's another important facet to keep just the content grind, and then the profit or return on investment. I think those two together is just not a good cycle for game development. It's not sustainable.
Mm-hmm. And it is sustainable if you're like a smaller studio. If you are someone who is, let's say, making like a tower defense game or like an idle RPG, you can release a new character. I'm going to put some air quotes here for easy, but it's far less complicated to make a new character or a new bit of content for a game like that versus, say, a fully 3D, asymmetrical 3v3 multiplayer, right, online shooter. But as you just said, it's that case of people expect this. When they see, if they're playing whatever game, they see, oh, well, this tiny mobile game is getting updates every week. This game is getting a brand new map every month. What am I doing here? Like, why am I playing your game and giving you money?
Exactly.
And the answer is, again, that it's that difference between the drip feed of content and actually having that game plan of saying, okay, in 2 months we're releasing a brand new story chapter. In 3 months we got brand new game mode. In 4 months we got this, and rinse and repeat until the sun dies.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, again, it's super important to have the plan going forward with what you're going to do and to be clear. And another thing that can happen, I don't know if it's like we were talking about the competitive gaming and like the anxiety you get with competitive gaming. I think that there's like a live service anxiety. I'm not quite sure where to get to it, but I think players, they know, right? They know it's a live service game, and they're like, should I invest my time into this? Is it going to get shut down? And then, is it going to continue going? And so it's like, really, should I invest any of my time into this? Because that's your most valuable asset. And most of the times I think people are right now, the way it looks, market, they're kind of saying, no, I don't have time for that. And I think also there's a massive glut, right? There was a massive amount of games, just like the MMO, resurgence. And it seems like that many games were released in this type of vein. And it's just, so there's so much competing for the same type of attention span and the same type of time requirements. Players are only like, I only got so much time for maybe one game, and the one I am going to play, if it's live service, I know it's constantly updated and it's the best of the best. I think that if you start tearing down on quality content, updates and things like that, that's where you start losing the players.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and it's that, as you just said, it's that investment that's such a big deal. As I said, when I'm playing Arknights, I'm giving them like the $5 a month for like bonus resource. So even then, there were a few months where it's like, you know what? I'm really not going to play this month. I'll, turn it off. But there are games that they basically demand, hey, we want you to be spending $20, $30 a month, or we want everyone to be spending, at most, or, max amounts of money. But it is that level of fatigue. And the one area where I think live service and / MMOs and mobile games really are similar, again, is the idea that you really can't play a lot of them, or, play them seriously. With, the indie space, again, in the week of Next Fest, I played probably 90 to 95 different games, very different titles. I could not imagine playing more than like 5, live service games at the same time. That would be crazy with that level of investment. And it is that issue of something has to give. Like even right now, like I'm playing like 2 or 3, I'm starting to feel that kind of, oh my
Mm-hmm.
god, I gotta spend 20 minutes doing this. I gotta spend another 30 minutes
Mm-hmm.
on this one, and then don't forget, you gotta check things multiple times a day. It's just like
Yeah.
I have other things to do. I can't be spending it doing all this. And to let me get their name. Unkim in the chat there, getting the live service games out a long-term plan. I think that is one of the big things. I think
Yeah.
that is for like a lot of AAA studios. Like you cannot kind of coast when it comes to a live service game. People expect, it's like the game is out. Okay, what's going to be coming in 2 weeks? What's going to be coming in 1 month? And again, it's why you need to be really thinking about kind of how you divide content up between short, mid, and long term. People expect to see something new very frequently. And again, frequently can be 2 to 3 weeks at minimum. If you're going like a month or two without some kind of new update, some kind of new content, most people aren't going to stick around. But then there's that other point about what's the big stuff? What is that, major thing you have coming 4 to 6 months down the line? Is it going to be a brand new chapter? Is it going to be a whole new set of maps and perks like with Dead by Daylight? And then you have long-term content, and this I think what really scares a lot of AAA developers. The long-term stuff, this is basically like developing a sequel to your game.
Sequel.
This is
Yeah.
like, okay, I want to see a brand new game mode. I want to see something that is completely new and original than what you start at launch.
Right.
And how many of these AAA live service games have done that? I honestly can't think of anything, maybe with exception to Fortnite.
Just
Like,
Fortnite, and one of the reasons why is okay. You said there, basically the first release of the game will say it's game A, and that's first one. And then when they're working on a live service, it's basically the sequel. Now, a lot of what happens underneath is I think that the code base that they're working on and that they're using is not ready to adapt right to a sequel, and so they not only do they not have the content drip feed and what they're going to do in the future, but they didn't even have like how their code and gameplay architect framework is going to scale up and go forward with the game. And I think that's a lot of the failings. They think, okay, we're just going to drop it, we're going to coast, and then hopefully during that time we'll get it up and running. But it's not like that. It has to be lockstep, on time, in time, on time. So like when the consumers needs to know, like you said, if there's plans for like a year, 6 months, and I say, okay, I know there's stuff coming up, there's something to look forward to or whatever, I can invest some time. They're saying they're serious. But as long as you see stuff is coming up, then you know what's happening. But again, if they just if it can't scale properly with the code base, and then you don't have content, then it like fails at both ends. Then you get a poorly created sequel that feels disjointed, right? Like it doesn't really organically grow in the correct way because of the code base, and then also the content was just not curated properly for both of those situations. So I think that's a common situation that happens, because you really have to consider that for a live service game. This game is going to be operating for 10 years, 20 years. How is the technology that I created the game with going to grow and be able to scale over a long term, right? And like, can it scale up and to get more servers? Can I do this or can I do that? All those things have to be taken into account for, and and understood. And so that's something definitely to be keeping in mind there.
And what you just said there about how technology evolves is another big point. I know one of the big issues that Dead by Daylight faced for some time was that the code was not optimized well. It was a very bloaty game. It was like 70, 80 gig download. And I think last year they did a massive patch and they optimized. I think it's down to like maybe 20 to 30 gigs. But these are things you need to consider, because a lot of people are going to look at your game and think, well, your game is 5 years old and it takes like 10 minutes to load and it just feels horrible to play.
Yep.
This game, runs at 60 FPS, it loads in, 5 seconds, and these are things that matter to people. Because again, one of the big things about live service is that time is your enemy. The more someone spends in that game, the more you have to keep them engaged. If
Yeah.
you say to someone, well, we expect you to play this game 2 hours a day, and 2 hours is just grinding, 3 multiplayer maps, how many people are going to stick around?
Yeah, exactly. You definitely have to offer a lot of variety in that respect. So,
Yeah. And the other point that Kim was making about, sell cosmetics and cash out, that is another big issue for a lot of live service games, is the monetization model. If you expect that your game is going to make $40 million out of, 4 millionaires spending, money every month,
right.
that's not going to work. And one of the, I think the biggest changes that we've seen from a lot of mobile developers who have succeeded is that they've become far more, I don't want to say, accommodating to free players, but they're making their games at least a little bit more fairer than they were 7, 8 years ago. Like, it is possible to earn regular free currency in these games. And that was something that I think a lot of, like, the initial live service developers were scoffing at. It's like, you must spend for everything.
Right.
And it has become at least a little bit better in that regard, but it's still a very, nebulous topic. Again, I talk about player-friendly design in my last book, and I can't think of any game that perfectly hits that just yet. Because there's always that monetization, and I think that's what drives a lot of people away from live service games. There's always that catch. Something has to be kind of locked away, or, put on this pedestal that you can't reach no matter how much free currency you have. And the question that every game goes to is, what is that limit? Like, as a free player, what can I possibly do in your game? And if it's not that much, or yes, you can play this, but it takes 8 months of grinding, I'm not going to stick around. And I think one of the big things, and this is a question I'm going to throw to you into the chat, I think the era of whale chasing when it comes to live service is over.
Yes. Yeah, I would 100% agree. I think now we're going to have to start, like, live service is it's gonna be kicking around for a little bit, right? It's not going anywhere. The mobile market's still gonna have it. But I think that the whale chasing time is over. I think the consumers have wisened up now, and basically, if the whales that already did do that before, I don't think they're into doing it again, right? Like, they've already invested it, and just another game's coming by. Hey, spend 5,000 or whatever, and it's like, well, I already did that on the last one, and it's just, so I don't think you can keep exploiting the same whales over and over again, and I think they will get burnt out. And I think, yeah, the whale chasing just for whale chasing is not viable for a business model anymore. Definitely not, Josh. You agree with that?
Mm-hmm. And again, it's an idea of trying to get more people to play these games. And the problem that a lot of them have is that either there's not enough content to sustain, or they're so focused on the hardcore mega whales that there's no room for anyone else to try and get in there. And this is something that we see from a lot of the multiplayer or PvP focus live service games, where, as we were saying at the start, it's all focused on endgame. And yes, if you're at, highest on the ladder, top guild, top whatever, that's when you can find depth and strategy to a lot of these games. But the problem is getting to that point, it's all about the monetization. It's all about that chase of, I need, the very best gear, I need the very best weapon, the very best character. And if I don't get that, there's nowhere else for me to go. I was trying out another kind of like idle RPG mobile game, and it's that very same issue, that spending money equals time. So if I want to, I could give them $1,000 right now. That gets me maybe 5 to 6 months of a head start. 6 months from now, guess what? Excuse me. In 6 months from now, All those resources are gone. All that is left. What do I have to show for it? I'm 6 months ahead, but now all those other people are catching up.
Yeah.
And it's just that kind of, it's trying to be that fire and forget strategy. We're just going to keep throwing more numbers at you. And what we've seen from kind of the change in live service with games like Azur Lane, Arknights, Genshin, and so on, is this idea of, we're going to sell you something that is kind of, I don't want to say it's forever viable, but it's something that's unique. That when you get that banner character, that's it. You don't need to spend any more on that banner. That character is yours, is in your account until the game eventually closes. And that kind of gives these things a lot more value than just saying, okay, this is the hot new character for February. Well, now that character's useless. Here's a hot new character for March. Well, now that character's useless. And some games have kind of gone away with that. Like, Contest of Champions is still one of like the most profitable live service games or popular mobile games. And what they kind of do is they just raise their rarity rate. So now, instead of 6-star characters being the top, it's now 7 stars. I'm sure in like the next, if that game is still around in 4 to 5 years, they may go to 8-star characters. And it's one of those games that, again, and I talked about this in my review of its monetization, that there's that kind of break-even point. I want to get your thoughts on this as well as chat. A lot of these games had this kind of break-even point in terms of their monetization, that if you can get past that bubble, if you can get, that level on your account or that really good character, the game kind of opens up. Like, you don't need to spend anymore. You're going to get free currency through PvP, or you can do all the free content. But the problem that I see, at least from my point of view, is that it's kind of like that line, that for a lot of free players, they're never going to get across this. And a lot of people tend to like this idea because, again, it's an idea of, okay, I paid my dues, the real game starts at $300 spending. And for some of those people, like when I watch like the Contest of Champions, like the people who, like the long-term players, so people who've been playing this game for 78 years now, outside of creating content where they, spend money on, whatever banner it is, they don't need to spend money anymore. Like, once you get, like, god-tier 6-star characters in that game, a lot of that content is now viable, and you're going to earn tons and tons of rewards. But again, building your progression into your monetization, or I guess building your monetization into your progression, it doesn't really feel right to me. So, I want to get your thoughts on that one.
Can you go and maybe simplify that, rephrase that for me, Josh, a little bit?
I guess, what do you think when the monetization is completely, I guess, factored into the progression? That there is that paywall or that progress wall that you either need to spend enough money or you need to get incredibly lucky to get past, and then you're kind of like in the land of milk and honey. But getting to that point can be a struggle for a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't particularly like that at all. Like, I just the whole business model, I'm not a fan of at all. So, I don't think that microtransactions. You're saying the microtransactions in the progression system?
Yeah, like into it? Like, you need to get like a good 5-star to progress, or if you don't get get one of 3 specific SSRs, then you're done. Like, you cannot make it past that point.
I suppose if you were the type of player that is into when you get into the land of milk and honey and you're into it, then I think that's okay. Then you'd be into it. But for me, that type of needed progression and microtransactions, I don't like that at all, and I'm not a fan of that. And I wouldn't play. I don't like any games that are really like that. Are there any that you play that are in that realm, Josh?
I would argue when I play Contest of Champions, it definitely hits that point.
Yeah.
What they did, again, it's brilliant, but it's also very insidious at the same time, is that you cannot just start Contest of Champions and get a 6-star character. You actually have to work through 1 star to 2 star, 3, 4, and so on. And it's that case where if you can get that one, like when you get your first like free 5 star, if you get a god tier 5 star as your first one, your count goes from here to there. Like it's just that massive. And then when you do that, you get to do more higher tier content. And the higher tier content, of course, rewards you with more 5 star, 6 star resources. So you get another really good character, your count goes even higher. But it's that problem of, let's say you didn't get a really good 5 star. Let's say you got one of the many D tier characters. Well, your count maybe goes from here to there. And you're kind of in that situation of, either I grind and, pray to the RNG gods, or I drop a bunch of cash and hope that, this 5 star ticket gets me that really good character. When I was playing Punishing Gray Raven for some time, that's an action mobile kind of game. There's one chapter, there's like clearly a progression gate with this one fight that all of a sudden this boss is like 8 times harder than all the content that came before it and all the content that came after it. And it's that situation of either you have the right characters or you spend enough money, or you're done. And in that game Memento Mori that I mentioned, like it looks beautiful, but it's just like a horrible game to play. It has it has that kind of thing. Like there's this one chapter where this character just like casually does 40 million damage to your entire party, and they get invulnerability shields when they're about to die. And it's that case of, you either spend enough or you grind enough to get past it, or you're done. And there's no... And I think this is what separates the games that succeed from the ones that don't. The ones that succeed understand that putting a gun to someone's head and say, give me $40 or you can't progress, kind of is a detraction from these games. And it's why, again, like games like Arknights and Genshin, they really go for like this kind of focus on variety of characters. So that if you didn't get the top tier character, well, these other characters will be able to work for you. I know with Arknights, if I ever dare utter the words that you can only win with the pay-to-win characters, the Arknights community will swarm on me like the angry mob. Like, there are people who have played Arknights and have never used a 6-star character, and they've beaten content. Like, it is a game where, again, you can punch way above your weight class. And those are the kind of games that I like, where it's that situation of, okay, I didn't spend $50 or $200 and got this character, but I can still do this content.
Definitely.
And when you release a game that is basically, well, no, you can't do that. Unless your account is at this level, whether it's by luck or by spending, the game is over when you get right there. And those are the ones that typically, I think, end up just not doing well long term.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, that type of progression system, it's like a Sophie's choice. Like you told me, I either spend money or I grind time. So none of those options sound really fun for me. So I think I would probably leave the game at that point, right? So yeah, I think that ones that do fail in that realm, that is definitely going to cause them to fail for sure. Because I would not continue playing that game, and I know most people wouldn't either. Mm-hmm. I mean, time or money, they're both kind of the same.
Mm-hmm. And to Smith's comment about what makes a live service game work and what doesn't. Yeah. One of the biggest things, and this is, I think, a really good lesson for even any developers to learn, you need a really fantastic opening. You want to get people onboarded and into your game as quickly and as effortlessly as possible. And it's why a lot of mobile games these days, I think, do a really standout job of quickly getting people acclimated to the systems, to how you play these games. Because again, they know that if your game's annoying them 2 minutes in, guess what? There's 27,000 pages of mobile and live service games on the Google Store or on the Apple Store. And you have to be very attentive to how you get people engaged in these games. A slow tutorial or a slow opening that can just be the knife for a lot of these titles. And then, like we say, if your beginning is good, you need to carry that through the mid and then to the late game. And as we were talking about earlier, a lot of mobile games and live service games, they fail when it comes to the late game. Because we're not talking about end game. Like, these games are not designed to end. They're designed around this just constant surge of content. And again, it's this idea that if my live service game is here year one in terms of content, year two should be here, year three should be there. And we just keep adding. One game that I really liked, it was Illusion Connect, and I played this for like 4 months when it came out like 2 years ago. That one closed at the end of 2022. And it had that same problem. At month 4, there was no new content. There was nothing new to this game. It was just basically, again, like, I'm going through the motions day in and day out. There's no, major event on the horizon. There's nothing that is giving me, assurance that I'm going to get something new to this game. And I quit, and a lot of other people quit as well. And it's a shame because, again, it had a very strong start. And this was something that Ramin and we've talked about this a lot. Telling me that your month 1 sales were really good tells me nothing about your game. I want to know what your sales are doing 4 months. I want to know if your concurrent user base is steady or if it's shrinking month by month, because those are the signs that a live service game is doing bad. Now, if it shrinks to, let's say, 5,000 active users and it stays at that point, okay, you've survived the crash. But as we were saying earlier with the AAA market, they don't want to hear that 2,000 active users a month. They want to hear, 20,000. They want millions of revenue. And a lot of these live service games, they just can't sustain that. Again, it's that same thing with originally with Dead Space, where they expected, 5 million copies for a survival horror game in 2004, 2005.
Yeah, and so again, this is like I was saying, this is the end game capitalism being forced upon studios that are doing this live service type stuff. I mean, basically, they're being forced, right, to maximize profits, produce new content, and keep players engaged, right? Mm-hmm. Eventually, this could lead to devs being overworked, crunched, rushing content out, not polished content, and then it's just so the lead focus on short-term games over long-term sustainability for a studio, it's not really good. I mean, it can be really problematic in the context of live service games, because expecting that amount of return on investment for every live service game is just not, viable. Like, they can't, like you said, they won't be happy with like a 2,000 player, 2,000 players playing and be like, okay, great. And it's actually succeeding and these people are happy. But what is more important is we need tons more profit, and thus we'll shut down the game. You know what I mean? And maybe those players would have been completely happy. 2,000 player base. They've been playing that for 10 years, loving that game. Update, you never know. But it will get shut down because it's not producing enough profit for the investors. And so it's just like, because live service games have the ability to generate so much money, they're going to be the targets of the biggest investors and the biggest sharks in the industry that are wanting these types of returns. And so that's a big reason why a lot of these were closing, is because they just couldn't sustain the profits that were required by their investors. So that's just what happens there. And really need to figure out a different business model or transition to some different business models. We'll get into that later. I think there's a few that are there that are already available, and we've kind of touched on some of them already. But just as we were saying, there's a massive glut of live service games, right? There's only so much time. There's almost so much money that each player has, and there's so many games vying for it, right? And so the ones that do have to be top quality. They can't have those progression issues. What we were talking about earlier. What would be the name for that? Micro progression transaction linked,
like paywalls or stuff like that.
yeah, just paywalls. We'll just go with paywalls. Yeah, and with paywalls based stuff like that, and they usually felt, well, actually we should do like a triage once we get all the games that have gone down, and we can go over each one maybe later and see, which this one had, what failed, where it failed here, where it failed there, what made it work and what didn't make it work. We could maybe look over them there later, but definitely, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And to Smith's question, which one works more, live service or single purchase? Again, when we say works, I think that is the, what do we mean by works?
Works.
Because if we're talking about from a qualitative standpoint, single purchase games, again, they deliver a finite source of content. If we're talking about from a financial standpoint, again, the live service games that work, they really bring home the money. But it's that issue of, how do you stand out? And I think, as we were saying, like, the initial investment is such a hard thing for a lot of developers to understand. Because you can't just say, let's turn a single player game or a single purchase game into a live service.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. And I think, again, you need to go into this as you're developing your game. What is going to be my plan 12 months to 3 years down the line of development? Because if you can't answer that by the time your game is out, it means you're not thinking long-term enough. And it is hard for a lot of these games. And again, the risks and the rewards, a lot of people will only look at the reward side of things, but they're not understanding that you can't be expecting your game to be pulling in $40 million a month. And
Nope.
One of the other points that we didn't mention, I think, is worth clarifying. It's that same MMO mentality of saying, well, if the top game is pulling in $50 million a month, then that must mean this market is 50 million strong.
No.
Exactly. It means that game is 50 million a month.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that your game is going to pull in 50 million. And
right. It might mean that there's literally zero left for anything in the market. Like, if you wanted to really extrapolate from it, right? So.
Mm-hmm. And I think to Smith's comment there, that's another interesting point. The actual content that you're getting in live service games, it's oftentimes not as qualitative as a single player expansion. Again, when we say expansion to a single player game, like a Skyrim or an XCOM or anything, what we usually get in that is brand new stuff. We get brand new maps, characters, weapons, enemies, and along. And when we talk about brand new or, an expansion or a DLC in a live service game, it could mean, okay, here's one new character. Here's, a different map, but it plays the same way as all the other maps. And again, it's wild, the live service games that do succeed, or they succeed long term, they go that step further. Okay, how do we introduce something brand new 8 months down the line? 1 year down the line? And that's what you really need to think about with these games. Because you cannot just survive on, here's the same 4 maps in rotation for 3 years from now, and you're going to use the same characters. And I think, to what Josh was saying earlier about competitive fighting games, I think kind of holds true here. That if you think that you can develop a live service game the same way you would develop a Street Fighter or a Mortal Kombat, it's not going to work. Because again, you can't tell someone, oh, we have one new character coming 7 months from now. I can tell you, every mobile game, if they try that, their fan base would be gone in like an hour once they hear that news.
They'd be like, that news wasn't up first? I should have read that before I downloaded it. What is this?
Yep. And to the other point about, again, what the market is. This was one of the things that I talked about in my book in terms of where mobile games have changed for the last 7 years. Mobile today is about carving out a very specific niche. What is my game going to be? Is this going to be there's a horse racing game, horse girl racing gotcha game out of Japan that is like one of the biggest selling games of last year. There's another one again, an Arc Knights, which is a tower defense. Azure Lane is Ship Girls shmup. The idea is that the mobile live service is about carving out these very specific topics. It's not about, okay, everyone now make a third-person shooter. Everyone now make a battle royale. Because they know that you cannot cannibalize off of the top dog like that. Because, again, it's that same question we asked with the MMOs. If someone really loves World of Warcraft, or they really love Final Fantasy XIV, why should they try your game that's kind of like it, but maybe not 100%, but it doesn't have 8 years of development attached to it?
Or all the lore of WoW or Final Fantasy, right? Like, it's just a brand new IP, and so, yeah.
Oh, don't forget, if your game commits the same mistakes as a game that has, $50 million a month of revenue, people are willing to put up with that in your game, right? You're never before seen completely untested title.
Definitely. 100%, Josh.
And yeah, it's why these games, they have to not only hit it out of the park day one, but they have to be constantly scoring home runs month after month. Because the second you miss a month, the second you say, you know what, we don't have any new content, or, there's a delay for 3 months, people are going to start looking at your game going, well, if there's a delay, why should I spend money? Why should I play it? And
exactly.
It is that situation of once, it's kind of like almost, this will scare every indie developer when I say this, it's kind of like having an endless Kickstarter. It's that idea that you need to be active every week, every day, every month for the rest of that game's life. And again, a lot of studios are not set up to have that long-term scope. I'm sure for every live service game right now, the developers are probably thanking and praying to their community managers for, keeping people alerted and running little contests and telling them, hey, we have something new. And this is, again, that thing that I mentioned in my book, that the live service games that make it, they become pop culture events onto themselves.
Yeah.
When Fortnite has a brand new update, or they do a big collab, the internet stops for like 5 minutes. And that brings in so much attention to these games. It brings people back who maybe stopped playing it. Oh, they're completely redoing the map. Oh, what did they announce? I think what's the next Fortnite collab? I forget. Is it Attack on Titan, or it's something? Like, I know it's some like weird. No, it's Junji Ito. They're doing, I think, a Junji Ito collaboration in Fortnite. Which,
wow.
Again, like, my mind is like shuddering about those words that I just said. But again, it brings attention to these games. When a mobile game gets a massive collab, Dragon Ball and Arc Knights, which I'm sure that's never going to happen, but Arc Knights is doing a Capcom collaboration. They did a Rainbow Six one year one. So these things get people excited, and it gets them to check this game out. And more often than not, it gets them to spend money. When you tell them that, oh, this limited time character is only going to be available for 60 days and that's it, FOMO takes over at that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Indeed, Josh.
Let's see. I just want to see if that is true. Yep, there's going to be a Fortnite gets new Junji Ito anime map, which, okay, we can now have...
But so Fortnite updates. So at the minimum, you have to at least keep up with Fortnite.
Mm-hmm. And yet, you have to get onto a schedule that you can adhere to. And again, that terrifies a lot of studios when you tell them, oh no, you can't just release stuff when you want anymore. It's, you tell them that you're having new content every 30 days, you have new content coming every 30 days no matter what.
That is, I would have to say that's sometimes an unusual situation for developers to be in, right? Like all of a sudden now, from creating the game to now you're creating content for the game. So you got to make sure you bring on the right type of people for that, for content creation and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely. Sorry, I lost my thread there.
And it is very hard for some of these games to keep going. And again, it raises that question. I think this will probably be a good time to talk about monetization models. What is going to be your way of earning money in these games?
Yeah.
And this is, I think, one of the things that separates, I think, a lot of developers or a lot of like single player or single purchase games from live service. A lot of indie developers, they don't think about monetization systems. And, rightfully so. If you're releasing a single purchase game, you're not thinking about how do I get someone to spend $20 every month in my game. But again, if you're building a live service game, you must have a monetization system. And I defer this back to the Talk Valve game. This was, I think, in like 2012, 2013. About switching Team Fortress into a live service game. And at the end of the day, there's one thing you have to understand. If you want a live service game to succeed, it needs to have money coming in. No money coming in means no development funds. And no development funds means you have no more support for your game. And it is, again, that case of money going in, money comes in, money goes out when you're trying to make a live service.
Indeed.
And so here's the question then, and I'm going to throw this to you into the chat. Where do you think live service can be as fair as possible? Like, how do you square that circle between we want millions and millions of dollars coming in every month, but we can't screw over the player base. We can't cheat them out of that money.
I don't. I was trying to think of like what other business models work as far as a live service, and I think that just the live service business model is just itself, and there's not much to change about it other than to maybe a completely different game model, because. As it is, like I think a live service game, depending on how it monetizes, can really be like a bit inhumane and a bit predatory to consumers and to developers also themselves. Like again, we're asking for a lot of time and a lot of money, and when you compare that to other business models such as purchasing once or maybe subscription or something like MMO style or something like that, it's quite different in the amount of content that's required and the amount of developer like you were saying, that infinite Kickstarter, like it's basically what it is, and you're constantly advertising the things. Now, advertising, okay, this character is going to come out. This is what it is. So it's like a constant Kickstarter for the game while you're trying to get the funding for it. Are you aware of any business models that might work better, Josh? Have you thought of any?
It's hard because again, it's that kind of like even the most like player friendly monetization system still has that attraction, that itch of, well, if I just spend $500, I got this really great character. I think ultimately one thing I would like to see more games do is establish a limit on how much someone needs to spend. And I don't mean like needs to spend like, $700 a month. I mean like, what should be the fair price of a 6-star character? We
Yeah.
were talking about this, I think, last week or on the forum about, horse armor. You know, what is considered fair for a meta character or a meta gun? Some people will say, well, if it's not worth at least $300, who gives a anything about it? But again, it's that problem of, do you expect people to get access to all your content? Or are you locking it behind either an implicit or explicit paywall? Because a lot
Yeah.
of games have pity systems. And a lot of defenders will say, oh, it's a 400 pool pity, so why are you complaining? When, a 10 pool is, $15. So take it 15 times 400 and then come back to me about what is considered the pity there. And again, it's an idea of, I think ultimately it's going to come down to, you deserve money for your content, but you shouldn't be developing content on the assumption that, it's worth, a new character is worth $500
Mhm.
maximum.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this several times before that like there needs to be some type of standardization,
Mm-hmm.
pricing, or just some type of like overall like standardization somehow, some way of what a character is worth, of what armor is worth, of what I don't know, aren't rings, etc. Just what a banner character is worth, and those need to be established because I think like having okay, here's a $700 character, and then another one I'm paying like $25. There's a big discrepancy there, and it's why is there such a difference? And so we do have to have some type of normalization and standardization for it to work and continue on this business model, I believe. I would really like to see it shift away from live service itself. Like, working can work, but I think like the business model that it has definitely needs to be broken down and changed because we've seen from all these shutdowns that it's not sustainable. Hey, Pony.
Yep. And I think one thing that I want to see more, like, again, like, I play a lot of the gacha style Hero Collector games. I would like to see a point where it is possible for a free player to collect everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this right there. I think what I just did was, send a heart attack to a lot of live service developers when I say this. But it's an idea that maybe as someone who plays this game for free, I can actually get access to everything at some point. And again, yeah, exactly, Pony. They all just had a heart attack. But like one thing I want to see like gacha style games do is that once I pull a character, that character is out of my rotation. Like I don't want to have to pull duplicates of something, especially if I'm trying to pull the banner character. Because
The first time I pulled a duplicate, I didn't even know that was a thing that you could pull a dupe, and I was livid. I was livid.
Josh is still like a child when it comes to the live streams. You have not seen the full well of gacha horror yet.
No, I haven't. I have not, Josh. Not at all.
Oh my. In one of the ones, I got 3 6-star pulls. 2 of them were duplicates, and one was the off banner. In like
Oh my
110
gosh.
pull, and I was just like going, really? Like, that is my luck. Right there, I know Jake Solomon is laughing somewhere about like the RNG look right there.
Definitely.
Yeah. And yeah, 2 Pony right there. Yeah. And again, this is the other point about like live service games. And I think this is another thing we didn't mention yet that needs to be mentioned. They can be very punishing for new players coming in late. And this is another big issue a lot of these games have. When your game is 1 month old, let's say it has 15 characters, 4 SSRs, or 6 stars, whatever you want to call them, and those 4 characters are really damn good. If there's only 16 characters, you have a 4 out of 16 chance of getting a really good character. And if you get that month 1 of your game, that's going to make it a lot easier to do more of that content. Now let's say we join this game a year. Now instead of 16 characters, there's 54 characters. And now maybe there's 8 really fantastic characters. Well, now it's 8 out of a 54 chance of you getting that. But then 2 years from now we're up to 120 new characters. Because again, that's where that monetization lies. And it becomes very hard for a new player to join in and have any sense of getting through this. Again, like with games like Contest of Champions, because they're tied to Marvel, every time there's a new Marvel movie or TV show, they add 5 to 6 new characters. So that is so huge. But again, it's that question of, if out of, let's say, 200 characters, there's 10 God tier characters, what is my actual chance of me getting one of those characters compared to someone who's been playing this game for the last 5, 7, 10 years?
Mm-hmm. This is true.
And to Smith's comment, that is a very tough question. Because again, when you limit your monetization, it means you're limiting the money that you can earn. Yes. And this is something that we've said before. I know Rami and I have talked about this quite a lot. The reason why people do this, it is effective. It brings in tons and tons of money. Rami talked about when he worked on World of Tanks. And World of Tanks has been earning a lot of money over the last decade. The developers wouldn't do this if it wasn't effective at making money. But again, it's that push and pull of, where do you draw the line on the amount of money that you expect to earn? With a game like Arknights, again, when they are releasing like a banner character or a limited time character every 6 to 7 months like that, they're not earning the same amount of money as Genshin. And we know that. We can look up the monthly earnings of how these games are doing. And again, it's that question of, are you fine with, let's say, only earning, $5 million, whereas someone else is earning $50, $60, $70 million a month? Oh, and I think Josh froze there for a second. Okay, you're back.
I'm back.
Yeah, you were like frozen there for. Okay, let's see. But they can't keep loading. And
they're good. I'm still.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay,
you were kind of like frozen for like. Oh, you're kind of like cutting in and out a little bit there.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm getting internet issues. Seems to be like I'm getting some internet issues here.
Again, all my internet issues transferred from this Josh to that Josh in 2023. Let's see. I guess I'll plan. Yeah. Yeah. And to Smith's comment, like, if you're an indie developer, I'm sure every indie developer watching this would scoff at earning $1 million, right? That just sounds horrible. If your game's not at least pulling $30 million, why even make an indie game, right?
Exactly. And like Toponi was saying, I mean, like I was saying, design kind of cursed, like, because they're forced to keep adding new stuff to keep the game fresh, but you're kind of bloating the game, like how you're talking about with getting characters later on and stuff like that, and that the game is very bloated, so you end up with a very bloated game, hard to balance game also. So the design overall of a live service game, it's okay, but it needs some changes, right? I feel like it needs some change to continue to be viable. There's ones that already got it locked, like Fortnite and stuff like that, but other ones, there's rooms for other ones to do different type of business models, and I think that would work better.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's another again, there's a lot of things we can talk about. Again, the free-to-play book was my longest book, not until I wrote the RPG book, which is now going to be the longest book I've written. But another aspect of this is that, and I think this also is a thing that a lot of developers don't like, is that you also need to develop free content. You need to be developing stuff that anyone can access in your game, whether they've spent $0 or they spent $5,000. And again, it's that case of, you're making content that has no return on investment. Like, this is not content that you're going to monetize. This is content that you're trying to grow the game. And this is something, again, where MiHoYo probably succeeds the most. Like, they release, like, brand new continents with original stories and all new quests. Arknights released a roguelike mode last year that is completely free. You don't need to spend anything to get into it. And this is the kind of stuff that, again, the purpose is twofold. One, it's to grow your game, and two, it's kind of to reward your player base. Hey, you spend money on my gacha banners or my premium skins. Here's all this great stuff you can do. You don't have to spend a cent on it. And I think that's one of the things that separates the good and the bad developers. That a lot of developers, when they release something, it is entirely monetization driven. Like, developers, and I always forget, I think it's Yostar does Arknights, Miyo does Genshin. Like, developers like this, they treat their properties, I think, with a little bit more respect than a lot of other studios. They think about, what is our story going to be? How are we going to develop the plot? 5 chapters in, or, 2 expansions in. So yes, a lot of people probably don't care about the story in Genshin. They're there for the shiny 5 stars. But again, it shows, I think, consumer trust, or it shows developer trust that, hey, we're developing monetization, but we're also got this entire storyline with original cutscenes and music that is completely free, and we got this plan for the next 5 years, so come and enjoy it. Let's see.
Lost chat.
Let's see. Okay. And again, it's about that, into Pony's comment, again, it's why people tend to gravitate towards some of the top tier live service games. That it is a great game, and the monetization is kind of second. Whereas for a lot of games, the monetization is first, and the game is not the best. Or you can feel, and again, this is, I think, to Josh's comment from earlier, the consumer has gotten very smart when it comes to seeing if they're being screwed by the game, or when they can see the bolts being tightened around certain aspects to make it more monetization friendly or pay to win friendly. I'll give you another example from that Memento Mori game. I was doing PvP, and I was fighting against a team with the character who was like 500,000 points or less. It was 5 against 4 in my favor. I thought, I can win this. And I lost. So I decided to watch a replay. One character on the enemy team just went like this, and they did 8 million damage. It was just instant death to my entire party. And I did that like blinking eyes meme for a second when I saw that. And then I looked at what they did for that character. And this person spent all the premium currency on like the very best, passives. They built this character perfectly min-max. And I realized at that point, it's like, there's no strategy here. It's a case of one bank account versus another bank account. And as I said earlier, there will be people who play stuff like Contest of Champions, Clash of Clans, and so on, who will argue with you at the super high level when money doesn't matter. There is strategy. There is depth. There is all this kind of, exactly. I think that describes capitalism right there. But there is all this kind of, it's so deep to build your party and all the perfect stuff. But to get to that point, you may need to spend 3 years of grinding, or, at minimum $700, and then you can have all that fun and amazing stuff. But again, I throw this question. How many people are going to jump through either the time hoops or the money hoops to get to that point? There will be people, again, for every mobile game like this, they're going to track that whale. That person who's like, you know what? Here's $8,000 a month. Give me the best characters. But it comes at the cost of all the rest of your content.
Indeed.
Let's see, I think design. Oh yeah, don't get me started on the whole customization versus personalization, Pony. We'll be here for another hour easily on that one. Oh, and don't forget about surprise mechanics. everyone loves surprise mechanics, right?
It's party.
So here's a very interesting point. We are recording this in the middle of February, and one of the games I'm very excited about playing is Limbus Company. That is coming in, I think, 9 days. Limbus Company is the latest game from Project Moon, who, again, they've earned like a lot of clout or free publicity for me from how much I love a library of Runa and Labami Corporation. And this game is being built as a gacha live service game. They did a whole video about how their monetization is going to work, and they're going to have a battle pass as well. And a lot of people are kind of sitting here wondering, where is this game going to go? Because the big thing that Project Moon has kind of prided themselves on with their last 2 games have been just doing things completely, off the normal path for their games. Library of Runa is a very unique game. But again, it's that question we were talking about earlier about, can a game succeed, fairly and ethically with these systems? I think Limbus Company is going to be one of those tests.
I believe so. I believe that eventually we'll have to switch over to a business model and a different business model. And I think that these games will survive. I think, you were asking me, I think on one of the last podcasts, we were talking about genres, will like shooter genres and violence genres be still the forefront? And it's the same thing that I would like to believe. Eventually those will not be the main genres, and I think that eventually this will not be the main business model either. And I think that a more humane business model that focuses more on consumers and quality of a game over instead of monetization will eventually start rising to the top.
Mm-hmm. And to Pony's comment about spend on a normal game that you could finish, that I think is another very interesting point. This is something that I'm really curious about, MiHoYo. Like, I would love to interview them at some point about this. Because MiHoYo, like, when they're designing their games, they think about an ending. Again, Honkai Impact is going to be ending soon. And they already got the next thing, I think it's Honkai Star Rail. And from what I've seen, people are not rioting at all about them turning off Honkai. Honkai is like one of their biggest sellers. I think it's like 6-7 years old at this point. But like, imagine if another studio, like if Epic decided to shut off Fortnite for whatever strange reason, people would probably riot in the streets. League of Legends would be the same thing. Like, that would be a very interesting conversation. I think I would love to ask Ramin about this as well, about what would it be like to develop a live service game that has an ending. That there will be a point where you will say, you know what? This game is done. We're moving on. Because a lot of live service games don't do that. Again, there's a reason why I don't call it an end game for live service. It's a late game. Because they're always trying to add more to it. And I know even with Arknights, the developers have been teasing a new game that they're working on. Now, I doubt they're going to cancel or they're going to show off Arknights. But again, it's that question of, can you think about a live service game that has an expiration date? That you say at this point, that's it. Like, this is content done for a live service title.
I love it. I think it's a great idea. I love it.
And
yeah, this is true. Yeah. Microtransactions are micro. You rename them.
Mm-hmm. And I think, like, this is another point. Again, there's many points we can talk about here. The mobile or the live service games that are single player driven, or they're not multiplayer focused, I think they have an advantage. While the multiplayer driven ones obviously can earn a lot more money, again, competition will get people to spend more money. But the single player, you can have that point where you say, you know what? The story is done. Everything is in our game. We're going to keep it up, but it's content done. But while that sounds bad when you say it like that, you also have to realize that there's no competitive aspect. It is a game that, it has 200 hours worth of story at the end of it. enjoy it. You know, if you want to spend money to get through it faster, you can, but you know that this game has an actual end to it. And that, I think, drives people. I think it's why a lot of people gravitate towards the Arc Knights, the Genshins, and so on,
Yes.
as this idea that, yes, I could play it daily, I could do all that, but I don't. You know, there's no one forcing me to play this game. You know, there's no guild that says if I'm not contributing at least 2 hours of my life every day, I'm going to get kicked out of the guild. And it does kind of work, but again, it's that question of, yes, but they could be earning so much more money. And there are developers who see that and go, you know what? Let's just make the more abusive version of this game.
Yeah. And sadly, I mean, you know, consumers know when they're in that never winning, never leaving, always playing, working treadmill, and it's not fun, right? And like, why would you want your players to be doing that? First of all, like, just, if we're really morally thinking about it, and you're like, yeah, profits, always profits, and it's like that's not what we're making games for. Like, games need to make profits because it's a business, but we're making games because they're art and there's something to experience, and they're a product for our consumers to enjoy, right? However you want to say it, but they're not supposed to be contrived money making machines, right? Where that's their sole focus. Like 100%, we're going to psychologically figure out how we're going to break down our customers and consumers, put them in a PvP environment where they're forced to purchase this banner character, or you know what I mean? Like doing those types of things to players, I think is just very wild, and not cool to do. And yeah, they don't have any incentive to improve. They have none, right? There's no incentive, because the incentive is more profit. They are incentivized to keep doing what they're doing and to continue doing it. But what I am saying is more like a visionary hope that in the future we will lead. It will have to lead to a more sustainable business model, because this type of predatory business model, while it works and it does generate a lot, it doesn't always generate the best type of experience for the players and the consumers as a whole. So I think that's one of the biggest cons about it.
And as Ponies, as you just said, there was no incentive. There was a reason why from like 2010 to like 2014-15, every live service game or mobile game was trying to copy a Angry Birds, or what was it, Fruit Ninja, or Jetpack Joyride, and don't forget about Farmville and Candy Crush Saga. Yeah. Because people thought that was the only way you could make money on these games.
This Match 3 was the only mobile game you could make.
Or the Farmville clones. How many clones of Farmville and Mafia Wars and so on and so forth? And one of the biggest changes that came in like 2016, 2017 was, let's make something different. And again, look at what Genshin has done. Like, Genshin came out the same month or around the same time as Marvel's Avengers. Marvel's Avengers was a far larger IP. No one outside of like the mobile space was talking about Genshin Impact in 2020. Everyone was talking about how exciting the new Marvel game was going to be. And that game just, crashed like the Hindenburg. And Genshin became one of the best, probably one of the most profitable mobile games of 2020. And again, it's that difference of how do you approach these games. And it does take someone to prove that the model works, that it works differently. And again, it's one of the reasons why, as you were talking about with Ramin, that I'm very curious to see what his game is going to do, because he's going all in on the what was it, play to pay or play to spend, the like kind of NFT. Style. And a lot of people are probably joking and wishing his game is going to die. But if he proves that that model can work, it will open up the door to other games. But again, as we've seen with mobile and with live service, there are a lot of games out there that are going for the lowest common denominator. They are trying to, slash and burn their way into success. And that's what people tend to think about with these games. Again, it took a long time in mobile terms for people to start treating mobile as not just another match 3 endless runner style thing.
Oh yeah, years.
And on the subject of like dailies and stuff, that is one thing that I've really just become fully soured on. Like, I cannot stand anymore a game that demands that I play it.
Yeah.
Or I would say at most like 10 minutes these days. Like, if you demand that I play your game for more than 10 minutes a day, I just can't do it anymore. Like, it just doesn't interest me.
Yeah, same here. I mean, if I see multiple currencies, if I see dailies, I'm forced to play the game. I mean, I'm not looking for a job video game that I have to pay for also. So that doesn't pay me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so,
And like, I would argue again, like with like a daily system, let me pull my dailies. Like, if I just want to play your game, let's say 1 hour 7 days a week, or 10 minutes 6 to 7 days, don't punish me for what my time is.
How do you play on the phone? I cannot play on. Kills my hands.
Yeah, like I usually like play while I'm like laying on a bed, so I have the phone resting on the bed, so I'm not holding the phone for however long.
Holding it, oh my gosh, yeah, does not work.
Yeah. And it's why, again, I'll probably be playing a Limbus on PC rather than on mobile. And it is just very annoying sometimes with these games. And like we said earlier, that you cannot have attentional pain points. We didn't bring up fun pain. Like, that was another major trend. Like, how many TED Talks and, mobile conventions had pain points and fun pain and all that in the 2010s? That was the whole Zynga model. Like, all the people like Zynga brought on were talking about that. Today, you try to put fun pain in your live service game, it's dead. People are not going to stay around because, again, the market has changed. Why should I play your abusive game when I have 70 games coming out that all don't do that?
Exactly.
I think I am about out of topics. Anything that you want to discuss?
Let me see. Let me look over my notes. I think we've basically covered everything. Yeah, I think that sums it up, Josh. Any other points though? But I think that's it.
I guess, again, like, to kind of summarize for the games we mentioned at the start about why they didn't succeed, again, is about having a well-executed and a well-developed plan for your content. You cannot be treating a live service game in the same way that you're treating a single purchase or a retail game. And not even like a competitive game. People expect new content, and they expect it regularly. And you cannot get by on cosmetics anymore. That was a big thing that I saw with Marvel's Avengers. They were announcing, we're going to release a new costume every 2 weeks, or something along those lines. But again, a costume is not content. You're talking about Blizzard veterans, Pony. Marvel Snap has been releasing new cars. It seems like every week or two, there's a brand new car coming out. And this is the kind of stuff that we can scoff at it. It's one car a week. This is the stuff that drives people to stay engaged with these games. Because they know there's something cool out now, and there's something cool coming a week from now, a month from now, a year from now. And you have to have that right mindset. You cannot just develop a live service game around a, let's say, 30-minute match or a 40-minute long battle royale, and that's it. Like, that's your entire plan for 5 years of development. They want new content. They want new stuff that changes this game. I haven't played a LoL in years, so I can't comment on that one.
Same here.
But, I think that's my final thoughts. Anything you want to add?
Well, let me see, Joe. I think you summed it up perfectly with that. I just hope in the future Your points were perfect, so I'm not going to talk about your points. I'm just going to say about the future. I'm hoping that we move to a more humane and sustainable type of business model for live service games or games that will be live service. Like, I mean, they may not follow the same model, but I definitely think that we need to a better type of business model feature so that these games can be allowed to succeed. We can have more games like these out there, and without the massive amount of profits and that is required for these studios to stay functioning, right? So they require so much ROI and from their investors, and that's that. So I think hopefully the business model will change in the future that will allow that to strengthen up and be easier on the consumer. Other than that, Josh, I think that pretty much covers.
Yep, and again, like to your point, that you have to go into these games with that right idea of how much money you're expecting out of it.
Yeah.
And I think one of the more fascinating topics we don't have, I think, the time to get into tonight is about Team Fortress. Like, Team Fortress, and even to an extent Left 4 Dead, I always found it very interesting that they came out, or they kind of stopped developing content right before kind of the live service bubble appeared.
Yeah.
And I always wondered to myself, what would have happened if, let's say, Left 4 Dead came out 2 years later? Would it have turned into something like Payday? Because Payday 2 was supported for years. They're still supporting it.
Yeah.
And again, it's that concept of, can you and should you support these games for years and years? And a question that we probably have to answer on a roundtable is it all right to say to a game or say to your consumers, we're done. This game is feature complete. We're not making any more content, even if there is money on the table.
I think so. I think that's an even better. Pony made a comment in the chat. Let me see if I can find it. I'll summarize it though. But basically, just talking about that, the games become bloated because the content constantly, and the games constantly become updated, and so you can't really polish it. You can't balance it perfectly. So if eventually you just created your product and then from there you just worked on that and polished that and balanced that and say, yeah, we're done, and now we're done. And I think that would allow for a really good experience, and it'll also be more humane for the developers, for the studio, for the consumers, and everyone involved. And I definitely think that would be a good way to do it. You can definitely do that, and more studios should. I think that the constant grind to produce content over and over again for your game can be quite draining on studios, and like the human cost that it takes to do that is just very heavy, and we don't really factor that in. Like the amount of imagine it's like you got to make this model like right now. It has to be done because it's coming out next week, and if it doesn't, then the game dies. People are going to think the game's dead. So you got to get that model done, and you know what I mean. So I can imagine the human toll cost that's going on there, and so that's why I'd like to see a lot of this reduced and changed to a different way and balanced out.
And I think to your point, I'm going to scare any developers again. Like, imagine being told you need to release feature-complete content every week for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
I'm just like causing heart attacks all episode long today.
Gosh. I'm gonna have a nightmare about a never-ending Kickstarter tonight.
There you go. It's February. I'm not due for a horror themed cast for at least another 8 months.
Okay, we'll wait. We got it saved for all of it.
And I would say, like, for one final point, if you want a live service game in terms of content to succeed, you need to stop thinking about your game as an endless, bucket that people have to keep throwing money in. What are they actually getting for their money? Again, one of the things about stuff like Genshin, Organized, and so on is that if I get a banner character, that's it. Like, I don't need to spend any more money this month. Or I don't even need to spend any more money, period. Like, you should be thinking about, there should be a point that people can reasonably just play your game without
Yes.
needing to spend money. And again, there's a difference between need and want. If
Right.
I want to spend, on a fancy skin or this really cool character, okay, that's fine. But the game should not be contorted and twisted and bent to desire or to force me to spend on this. Or if I don't get this character, then I can't do any more content, or the entire game is basically over.
Yeah, well said. And you know, the first time I actually played one and I realized it wasn't like that, again, I was naively disappointed when I was like, wait, I can't. Oh, they're locking me. They're paywalling me. So I was, but the first time that happened, I thought for sure every game it'll allow me to get this skin or I can grind my way there eventually, right? No, you can't.
Oh, God. One of these days we have to watch Joshua play a mobile game for the first time and just watch the color drain from his face as he gets all these realizations.
We'll definitely have to do a live stream.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just checked, Olympus Coming is actually out in 6 days, so for those of you who aren't used to watching gotchas and rolling, you get to see that live when I play the game on the 26th. So maybe you can watch and you can experience some of the horror with me there.
There you go.
But I think that is going to do it for this week.
Well, we're turning it into a live service podcast, so
okay, we need to get another hour's worth of content in 20 minutes.
In 20 minutes, in 20 minutes we'll have another hour of content for you guys.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Stay tuned.
People want that endless cast, so our voice will just be completely dead.
we should. We'll do an endless cast one of these days.
Exactly. But that's going to do for this week. We haven't decided what will be next week's topic just yet. We still have our list to go through, and we also need to get some roundtables set up as well, which will kind of determine things. But for those of you watching, if you have a suggestion for a future show's topic, let us know in the comments or on the Discord.
Yes, and like always, join Game Wisdom Discord so that way we can discuss topics about what we want to do in the videos, etc. Discuss game design with us, buy Josh's books, wishlist Samurai Pig, and if you need any help with an Unreal Engine project consulting, please contact me and I can help you with that. And Josh?
Yeah. Again, do the liking, subscribing, commenting. I have to tell people to ring bells now to make the algorithm happy. We will be back next Saturday around 5 p.m. ET for our next show. And again, check out all the books, check out all the links down below as well. Other than that, everyone, have a great rest of your weekend. I believe we have a holiday coming up. Again, the time means very little around here, so who knows when all the holidays are. But if there is indeed one, have a great day off and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where it's in the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.